Hi, and welcome back to another one of our online lectures here in world history. Today we're going to kick off our unit on imperialism to independence. Really what we want to look at here is the effects that imperialism has had in different regions around the world. We're going to focus on British imperialism for most of this unit, but they are not the only country that had imperialistic pursuits that led them to other places around the world. So we're going to focus today specifically on British imperialism in India. Now, we do have two constructive response questions we're going to seek to answer here today. The first one says, categorize the positive and negative effects of British imperialism. We definitely have to understand that imperialism can cause some pretty bad things to happen. When you look at a country taking over another country or invading another country, oftentimes that's the definition of imperialism, and those countries can do some terrible things, like taking out resources and mistreating the people, things like that. However, there are positives of it as well that we will see here today. Now, as the British get into India, they come in contact with the Indian people, of course, and a lot of those Indians choose to fight for the British, and they're called sepoys. We're eventually going to see something called the Sepoy Mutiny, so we're going to be able to describe that by the time we're done with this. So those are our two questions we're going to seek to answer here today. So what will we learn? We're going to talk about what imperialism is, just to make sure we have a working definition and understand the idea. We're going to look at how the British control India, and we're going to look at the positive and negative effects of imperialism. And certainly one of the negative effects is the Sepoy Mutiny. So that's our plan for today. We spent a lot of time in this course talking about the Spanish, the Portuguese, the Dutch, even the French, and how they've gone out and colonized different parts of the globe. And I've always mentioned that the British do it as well, but they come a little bit later. So if you look at this map in 1815, you can see the British, everything in red is part of the British Empire. They control a lot of property around the globe. They have lost the American Revolution, so they do not control America anymore, but they do have land in Canada. You can see in South America, bits and pieces in Africa, of course, India and Australia. But that's going to grow. That we're going to see more red as time goes on. To the time period of 1899, you can see it's grown immensely. By 1899, the British Empire encompasses all of India, all of Australia, much more of Africa, and all of Canada. I'm not sure why they have the American colonies on here, but they do. So you see the British Empire is massive. It is very, very large. Much bigger than Genghis Khan's empire. But remember, Genghis Khan's empire was the largest unified land empire in history, which would have been right here. The British control lots of different pieces around the globe. Just another look. This is every territory ever controlled by the British. That's, I'm assuming, why the American colonies were on the previous map. It's pretty much the same thing. This is all the land that the British had controlled at one point, and it is a lot of land. This is just sort of an FYI if you want to kind of say, well, we call it England, or we call it the UK, or we call it Great Britain. This kind of breaks down who owns what or what's a part of what when it comes to England or Great Britain. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this, but feel free to pause it and take a look at what this is trying to say, for at least what the Crown controls. Again, you can see Ireland's kind of outside this, the British Isles. So again, I'm not going to go into too much detail. You can certainly take a look at this. The British East India Company is going to set up trading operations in around the East Indies. It's going to make them a lot of money, and this is where a lot of this starts, because certainly our conversation today is about British control in India. So naturally, you have to start with the East India Company. But like I said, to really start this off, we need to make sure we understand what imperialism is. So if we set the stage here, we need to give this definition. So imperialism is a policy in which a strong nation seeks to dominate other countries politically, economically, or socially. I like to paraphrase it as it's when a country goes outside of their boundaries and takes over another territory or another country. Obviously, if you've got guns, you've got weapons, and you want to move in, a lot of times you're going to be able to do so. Sometimes it's not done forcefully, of course. Sometimes it's done through trade. But imperialism is when one country essentially starts dominating another for these particular reasons. So the British economic interest in India began in the 1600s with the British East India Company. And this goes back to the age of exploration. We had mentioned the Portuguese, the Dutch, the Spanish, and of course the British were involved in this too. But the Dutch East India Company was more powerful. It'll be later on that the British become the dominant force here in India. So this establishes sort of the beginning of British colonialism in different territories. Now, part of why any of this was allowed to happen is the Mughal dynasty in India began to crumble. So in a lot of sense, India was sort of ripe for the taking. You didn't really have strong leadership. The country itself was very weakened. So historically, this was a perfect time period for the British to move in and try to occupy or take over India. So from 1757 to 1858, the British East India Company was the leading power in India. They moved in with their superior ships and weapons and government, and they were able to establish control in India. So here's a map, British imperialism in India. You can see British don't obviously start out by taking all of India. You can see the pink areas here. Naturally would have access to water and shipping for the British is part of the reason they were able to move in at all. Eventually the British will control all of India. So British expand control over India. Well, the area controlled by the East India Company grew, and eventually they controlled Bangladesh, most of southern India, and territory along the Ganges River. And that's referring to that map we just looked at. But this is going to continue to grow over time. And I like this picture. This is an image basically showing England sort of having their hands in India and Egypt and Canada, certainly a political cartoon making fun of the extent of the British Empire. Now, this is going to set up a conflict later on because within this British control that they had in India, you had something called sepoys. Sepoys were Indian soldiers, and they made up a large part of the East India Company army. Basically, these were British men who were conscripted into the, these were Indian men conscripted into the British Army, and that's going to cause some conflict later on, as you're going to find out. Because their cultures, in a way, are going to clash. But at least for the time being, you have Indian soldiers called sepoys fighting for the British. Now, a little ominous foreshadowing was said here. The governor of Bombay in India referred to the sepoy army as a delicate and dangerous machine, which with a little mismanagement may easily turn against us. The governor of Bombay, of course, would have been British because the British had control there. He recognized these sepoys might be a problem later on. Again, I'm sort of setting up future conflict that we're going to talk about later in this presentation. Now, British expand control over India. Part of the reason they wanted India at all is India was considered the jewel of the crown due to its profitability for the British. You know, most of these countries don't go and take over other property unless they can profit off of it. And I do mean profit in terms of wealth, whether that's jewels or tobacco or gold or salt or diamonds. There's lots of different reasons why these countries wanted to go and take over other territories. In the end, it was all about money. And that's that idea of mercantilism that we talked about in the age of exploration. Of course, the more wealth you have, the more power you have. So that's definitely going on here in India. So British policy demanded that India was to produce raw materials for the British and to buy British goods. Eventually, this allowed the British goods to drive out all local producers. This is a very big economic effect. Let me read that one more time to you and kind of explain this. So British policy demanded India to produce raw materials for the British and to buy British goods. Basically, what this is saying is Indian manufacturers don't matter. We want all our goods to be bought from the British, so the British make the money, and the British have that profit, whereas the Indian farmers, the Indian merchants, the Indian artisans don't. They are the ones who lose out big on this. So the British are essentially going into India, and they're taking all the wealth. To make sure this happened, the British had set up railroads in India, and they had transported tea, indigo, coffee, cotton, and opium. Basically, the British were there controlling the infrastructure and controlling the economy. And that's going to be pretty detrimental to the Indian people. Now, what this does then is it gives us sort of a two-sided approach to this, because we definitely need to see the positive and negative effects of British colonialism. When one country moves in and takes over another country, doesn't mean it's all going to be bad. But I want you to understand that we have to look at both sides of this. So we're going to start with the negative effects, because I think these are the more important ones. First of all, the British held much of the political and economic power in India. India did not have a lot of power to make policy, nor were they in a position to take the money from the resources that were there. The British were dominating both sides of that coin. The British restricted Indian industries such as textiles. So there again, we have the British determining what's going to be produced and who's going to buy it and where it comes from, all in the name of profitability for the British. So the British are controlling the economy again from what we see here. The British then put a huge emphasis on cash crops. They wanted to make money. So this resulted in the loss of self-sufficiency for many villagers. So villagers were forced to produce crops that made the British money rather than on crops that fed their families. So you can imagine if you're a farmer and you've always grown food that feeds you and your townspeople, but now you're being forced to grow another crop that makes the British money, that's going to not only you're going to lose your self-sufficiency, but you might starve, you might lose a lot of money. This is going to be very detrimental to a lot of poor farmers in India. So here's a big result of that. The conversion to these cash crops reduced food production, causing famines. People starved. I mean, the British weren't concerned about how were the people doing. They were more concerned about how much money they can make. That is a huge negative effect. There's definitely a lot of British missionaries that showed up, bringing Christianity, and certainly racism threatened traditional Indian culture. So you have British culture coming in that was predominantly white Christian, and that's clashing with the Hindu culture that existed in India. So you're, in a way, you're trying to force the Indian people to be more British when, they're not. I mean, they weren't. They're Indian and they're Hindu. But there are positive effects that come from all of this. Number one, we talked about railroads. So the British laid the world's third largest railroad network, creating unity and allowing India to create a modern economy. I mean, there's no doubt the Indians are going to benefit from this. You've got rail lines that can help trade, that can help travel, that can help a lot of different things in India. The British also built road networks, dams, bridges, irrigation canals, telephone and telegraph lines were built, which all helped India modernize. So these are things that were built mainly to help the British, but of course they're there that the Indians can benefit from these things as well. Dams, of course, help with flooding and help with eventually with electricity. Bridges help with travel, road networks, travel. This is definitely going to help India quite a bit. Sanitation and public health improved. There's no doubt that the British are going to bring some new techniques, different kind of cultural emphases that really provided a cleaner, healthier place for India to grow and modernize. Schools and colleges were established, so that means literacy improved, so more people could read and write in India. And British troops came in and they helped clear central India of bandits and put an end to local warfare. So when you have a country that's in control of another country, sometimes that can actually make the host country more peaceful. And so that's exactly what happened here. So you're looking at a lot of interesting positive effects. I don't know that they outweigh the negative effects, of course, but of course these things have to be mentioned. One of the things you had going on in India at the time was the caste system. I'm not going to speak to a lot of this, but the caste system is essentially a rigid class system where you could be born into one of these castes here. Typically, you had one of these four castes and then the untouchables, which were the people at the bottom. And there was really no social mobility to move up in the caste system. So it's just a little bit of the social pyramid within India that has been since abolished today because of its rigid system. You couldn't move. They definitely wanted to do away with that, and they have since. So we're going to end there. When we come back, we're going to talk about the Sepoy Mutiny. So we should have everything we need to answer our first constructive response question, describe the positive and negative effects of British imperialism. We just looked at a couple of slides there that had that information. So we definitely have enough to go off of that. When we come back, like I said, we'll talk about the Sepoy Mutiny, and we'll be able to answer that question. And then eventually we're going to see a rise of nationalism. When people are subjugated long enough, eventually they want to fight back, and they start self-identifying themselves with who they are rather than who the invading country is. That's exactly what's going to happen here in India. So you can go ahead and hit stop and queue up part 2.